So, all my life, I wanted to be a superhero. I'm sure many of you have too. Mine started back in 1978, just to give you an idea of how old I am. And I got really excited with this idea of having the Jedi mind trick, where I could kind of, do things with my mind. I could just think things, and with some simple language, I could say, hey, give me $1 million. And you would give me $1 million. And then along came the X-Men, and I met Jean Grey, right? Ms. Marvel, Lady Marvel. I can't remember her superhero name. But anyways, she can move objects with her mind. She's a telepath. And, sorry? The Phoenix, exactly, the Phoenix. And she can just kind of imagine things and move them with her mind. She has the power to control objects. And as Carl mentioned, I've recently joined Singularity University, and there I learned a lot of really cool stuff. And then I saw this.
You're watching the most advanced brain-machine interface in action.
I lied about the sound.
Kathy Hutchinson is paralysed and unable to speak. But just by thinking, she's able to control the movements of this robotic arm and drink her morning coffee.
Okay, she just moved that object with her mind. Therefore, she's a superhero. This woman's a superhero. So she's quadriplegic, and the researchers at Brown University have put a chip in her M1 neuron. That's the one that lets you control your hand movement, okay? And so just by, and she's quadriplegic, so that doesn't connect now. When she thinks about moving her hand, nothing happens. So what they did was they put a chip there and allowed her to move this arm with her mind instead. So all that she's doing is the same thing that we would do when we think about moving our arm, and suddenly this robot arm moves for her. A little more complicated than that, needs a little more work, but still. I think this means we can make superhumans with technology. All we need to do is figure out how to make it like magic. And Arthur C. Clarke said that any sufficiently advanced technology is nearly indistinguishable from magic. So, clearly we need to teach technology how to be magic. And if we look at BrainGate 2 as any example, that means that all we need to do is create a brain-computer interface, right? Why not? We're cybernetic already, right? We spend a lot of time hands down on our screens. I see several of you right now, heads down on your screen, accessing the Google Hive Mind, Googling all kinds of questions, from something as simple as what's the weather today to, when did the word hive mind come into existence. We can Google all of that. And unlike you and I, who spent decades in school learning facts and figures so that we could recall them, today's generations just Google that. And they have all of that factual knowledge right at their fingertips. And there's all kinds of technologies that are continuing to develop on that wavelength. So why would we not want a brain-computer interface? Just kidding. It's not magic, right? We all have this fear in our mind that the minute, at least I do, I don't know about you, but the minute I think about a brain-computer interface, I think of blue screen of death. And what would happen if my brain suddenly glitched out and I no longer had the ability to think, right? My entire world would go down. That is not an acceptable behavior. Now, why do I think that? What is it that's causing me to think that? It's today's human-computer interface, right? Also called HCI. And the way that we go about this now is that we train everybody how to use technology, what hoops to jump through to get technology to respond in the way that you want and need it to do so. Right? So as a user experience designer, I spend a lot of time trying to dumb down tech speak into human language. I'm trying to translate from tech to human. So humans are getting really good at speaking tech. The problem is that technology is far behind in understanding human. So let's look at what happens in magic in order to teach technology how to be magic. First off, magic is all about skipping steps. If you saw a magician shoving a rabbit in the hat and then jumping up on stage and pulling it out, it wouldn't be a magic trick. You'd be like, yeah, I knew the rabbit was in there. What? There's nothing exciting about this. So what magic does is it creates an illusion of simplicity where, in fact, complexity exists. Okay? That's all magic is. It's creating this illusion of simplicity, even though you know there's hundreds of steps involved, and that's what is so wow about it. Our brains do this same thing. Our brains skip steps all the time, right? So we have very limited working memory. There's not a lot of available memory for tasks and things like that. And so what happens is we use our innate cognitive abilities to offload a lot of tasks from our working memory. By that I mean to say things like, where are my keys? I have a spatial memory of that place. So because of this limited working memory, we'll notice something that happens. So I know every single one of us has this problem. You walk through a door, and suddenly you forget why you're in there. You just can't remember what you were doing there. Our brains have a limited amount of space available for a task. It's called your short-term memory. And so these innate cognitive abilities help us to offload a lot of things. For example, I am horrible at remembering where my keys are. I'm awful. If I put them down, I lose them. But if I put them in the key box near the door, I always remember where they are. It's called spatial memory. It's a very powerful tool, and so much so that researchers say that spatial memory is free. It's just something you get for free by existing in the world. There's all kinds of other innate cognitive functions that we have that we offload this working memory, from proprioception, right? I know where my hand is, to spatial cognition. There's tons of them. So the way that our HCI works now is that it's all about doorways. Every time that we have to stop and interact with our device, stop and look at the screen, establish which item we're going to click on the screen, we're basically forcing the user to walk through a doorway. And you remember what happens when you walk through a doorway, right? You forget. You lose all sense of memory, of task memory. So every time that we ask a user to interact with a device, either to click a link or to look for some navigational element, we're asking them to walk through a doorway. This creates an interrupt in their task memory, which can cost anywhere from 30 seconds to 30 minutes to recover from. To give you an idea of the scale of this problem, in looking for flights down to LA, I have to get on a plane after this talk. In looking for flights for that, I spent an hour online, and I did 275 task switches. 275 opportunities for me to get completely interrupted in my flow and get completely confused as to what I'm doing. All because every time I'm interacting with my interface, I'm creating an interrupt. That's a huge problem that we don't even realize we're doing because we're just so used to it. And all those interrupts are causing us to limit our ability to use the power of technology. So here's what I learned from Big Dog. I worked with the military research group DARPA a few years back in my studio, Kicker Studio, and on this robotic mule from DARPA and Boston Dynamics called Big Dog. Okay? So this is a bot that has to interact with humans all the time. And the training for this bot was really elaborate. It took about 3 months. There was, maybe I'm exaggerating, it might be 2 months. But you had to use command line language. You have to have a big, powerful laptop and an Xbox controller that you would direct the bot around with, which is a really complicated thing. And here's the thing. When you're being shot at, you have no available working memory. You're so busy trying not to die that you lose your ability to feel things around you, okay? Because your body is so focused on not dying. So asking these people to stop and operate that complicated interface is not going to happen. In fact, the soldiers that we talked to said they were just going to abandon that bot on the field because there is no way that they were going to worry about that if it was up to saving their own lives or the lives of their colleagues. Just weren't going to do it. So I started watching them as they did their military maneuvers, not in situ, just on a practice field. And I noticed that they used this kind of hand signals to communicate to each other where to move and when to move and how to move and all of that kind of good stuff. And I asked them about it. I said, what is this? Well, apparently they have this whole sign language and vocabulary that they learn in boot camp. The minute they walk into boot camp, they start learning this language. So that once they actually get out into maneuvers, it's just second nature. It's instinct, right? It's innate. That thing that we were talking about as being necessary, it's innate, right? So they use it to communicate to one another. So for example, follow tight means follow me at 1.5 meters exactly. These are the same commands that we were trying to tell the robot to do. Only to tell the robot, we had to do all this special, fancy hand wringing and typing and memory. So what we did was we said, hey, you know what? On this bot is a crazy powerful sensor that can see everything around it. Why don't we just teach it how to recognize these gestures? Crazy, right? I know. And that's what we did. So suddenly they could use the robot, no problem, no training. If something happened to one operator, the other one could just pick it up and start operating it because it was communication as if they were communicating to just one of their colleagues. I'm totally running over. So to make technology feel magic, we have to offload the brain, mimic the brain strategy of allowing us to offload tasks to our innate cognitive abilities. Now, we all know in this room that VR is magic. VR creates magic by offloading a very essential part of our cognitive burden of watching entertainment. And that is it removes the cognitive burden to suspend disbelief. So you guys all know what suspension of disbelief is, right? That's that thing that happens when you're so engrossed into a movie or a story that you forget that you're watching something over there and you actually start to imagine yourself as being there. Well, what VR does is it removes that literal divide between you and the screen just by whoop, putting it right up against your face. And suddenly that cognitive burden to suspend disbelief is removed. And now we have the opposite problem. Now we have to tell ourselves this isn't real. This isn't happening, right? This is why Wired calls it the you person experience. Instead of a first person, it's a you person because you feel physically present there, right? And it does this because it provides 70% of your visual sense. 70%. That's a huge amount of your visual sense. And your visual cortex is incredibly important to humans. If you take your hand and you put it on the back of your head, okay, that's about the size of your visual cortex. It's a huge amount of your brain, okay? And we use it to interpret all of our other senses, from smells to sounds to touch. And we also use it to instigate 85% of our innate cognitive abilities, okay? That's a large amount of our cognition. And that's all through our visual sense. So if we're hijacking your visual sense, we can do all kinds of things. Humans have evolved to interpret a lot about the world through their visual sense, right? Like, you can tell that it's a warm day out there in this video. You can tell that it's a little bit breezy. You probably have a guesstimate about what temperature it is. You have a distinct understanding of where you are in relationship to the view, right? You're kind of looking up and through the trees. Versus here, where you're kind of looking out and down over the trees, right? So we've evolved as a species to make a lot of sense out of our mind, out of the visual data. So when we hijack your visual data, you get this kind of crazy experience. I missed it. Anyways, you all have all seen people fall over when they, oops, I'm pushing the wrong button. Yeah. So anyways, people fall over because they get confused. They can't tell the difference between what's happening physically to them and the visual sense. It's that powerful of a sense. So we can use this and harness it for our extreme benefit, right? We can use it to create superhuman strength to transcend pain. Researchers at the University of Washington's HIT lab discovered that burn patients, so these are people with severe burns over a large amount of their body, Iraq veterans returning with these types of burns, only received 10% benefit from morphine. That means their pain is only reduced by 10%. Okay, that's nothing. It's absolutely nothing, right? But remember what I said. Your vision interprets all of your other senses throughout your body. So what these researchers did was they created this game called Snow World. It's a VR game. They put it on the patient during treatment. The brain sees this icy wonderland and starts to interpret all those burning sensations as cold, which is huge because it alleviates pain 60%. Morphine transcended the whole the experience. We can also create Wolverine strength to be able to heal our own body. I'm getting there. I'm going to be a little late. Heal our own body. So have you met James Blaha? He's big in this community around here. So he created this game called Diplopia. He has a lazy eye. Doctors told him, hey, guess what? Neuroplasticity ends at age 12. You're never going to be able to repair your lazy eye. You're always going to have 2D vision. So what he did was he created this VR experience that provides different stimuli to both eyes, right? And he fixed his lazy eye. He created he reinvigorated his neuroplasticity. In fact, there's a huge article about this in October of 2015 Science, if you want to check it out. It's really cool. VR renews neural plasticity. Okay. So, to make tech human, we just have to train it, to make superhumans, we just have to train technology to speak human. And that's actually not as hard as it sounds. First, we need to adapt to the individual. We are entering an age of ubiquitous sensors everywhere, from IoT to wearables to things that are strapped on our head and see every single thing that we see, okay? So this should be easy. We're going to have all kinds of data about humans. And here's what it's going to find. It's going to find that we are very habitual. We do the same things at the same time in the same places every single day with the same people. Yeah, this teacher cracks me up. So anyways, right, you can predict without fail what I'm going to do in the morning when I sit down for my coffee versus at night when I'm watching TV on the couch with my husband, right? It's really easy. So you don't have to put a chip in my brain to adapt to the way I do things. You just have to pay attention to me. And then anticipate the right steps to skip. We have all kinds of AIs, from Viv, which I think is going to be very important in this marketplace, to AlphaGo, DeepMind from Google, as well as IBM's work. There's all kinds of really great AIs coming online that love to detect patterns that we can't even see. They're really good at it. So they can adapt interface on our behalf. And then finally, continue to augment the human, and not just our eyes, right? We need to augment more than just our eyes, from our tactile experience to our auditory and smell. So if we follow these steps, we don't even know the power. Your superpower is waiting. Will you answer the call? Thank you.